We grow when we give.
We grow when we give.
We grow when we give.
Nosotros crecemos cuando damos.
We grow when we give.
与えるとき成長する。
We grow when we give.
Welcome to R.O.G, Return on Generosity, a podcast celebrating generosity at work. Not financial giving, giving valuable time, alternative perspectives, and genuine collaboration.
Our special guest today is Lai-DuMone, the founder and CEO of Work Smart Advantage, where she leads teams and leadership development programs utilizing creativity, play, and curiosity and Legos to evolve mindset, skill sets, and behaviors in the workplace. Her work is built on the foundation that we are all creative, that good ideas can come from any level in the organization. And by cultivating idea sharing in the workplace, everyone has a chance to have their ideas heard. And when that happens, company culture, performance, and innovation can skyrocket. She shares her work in her TEDx talk titled What If? The Life-Changing Power of Curiosity, and her book, What If Pigs Can Fly? A Practical Guide to Follow Your Curiosities to Achieve Impractical Possibilities. What I appreciate most about you, Van, is your willingness to ask what if and inspire us to take small steps to lead with curiosity. I'm thrilled to have you here. Welcome to R.O.G.
Thank you so much. I am thrilled to be on R.O.G.
Yes, thank you. Finally. So let's start with your background. You have an incredible background. I'm sure we'll talk about it throughout our conversation, but please tell us where you were born.
Sure. So I was born in Vietnam, and I love being on this podcast we call Return on Generosity, because sitting here in front of you, just in this space and getting this opportunity is because of so much generosity that's happened in my life. So my background is born in Vietnam. My family and I fled Vietnam at the fall of Saigon, April 29th, 1975. And it was through so many acts of generosity that got us here. And I grew up here in Santa Monica after being in a refugee integration center up in Northern California, and prior to that at Camp Pendleton Marine Base. So our first home was at a Marine base here. And then through acts of generosity, we were sent to an integration center up in Northern California. And then again, another act of generosity brought us down to Santa Monica when a church sponsored us, and they got us our first place to live. My parents got jobs here, and this is where I was raised. I was raised in Santa Monica, went to school at UC Santa Barbara, then Pepperdine, and ebbed and flowed through a variety of different careers, not really ever feeling like it was the right place for me until I started this business about 10 years ago. And as you said, what I do at Work Smart Advantage is I deliver team leadership development programs, and I really lean into the idea that we are all innately creative and curious.
And what led you to that?
So I have always been creative, and artistically creative, right? I wouldn't say I'm an artist, but I've always been very creative. You can ask my mom when I was little. She would buy me things. I would immediately paint them. But being a Vietnamese refugee, becoming an artist was not exactly supported. But I always had this creativity. And when I was working in my last corporate job in pharmaceuticals, I had this idea: how might I bring this idea of creativity into the corporate world? Because again, I always felt like my creativity on the side helped me be more creative at work. And I sat on the idea for 6 years because, I wasn't taking small steps, because I was thinking my thinking about it overwhelmed me. I was thinking I'm going to start this business. It's going to look like this. And because I was thinking too grandly, it stopped me in my tracks. So I just stayed in my job, and it sat in my head for 6 years. And I think I know the turning point for me was I got married. I had my baby. My son was 8 weeks old. My brother, a police officer, got into a severe motorcycle accident and was in a coma for 2 months within the neuro ICU. And was within those 2 months, just carrying this child with me in the ICU, just roaming the halls every day, not knowing what's going to happen to my brother, and looking at this baby. I was like, you know what? I want my son to see his mom doing something she loves and taking chances. And clearly with my brother in that condition, I'm like, life is too short, right? I've known I wanted to do something different for 6 years, and yet here I still am. So it was those two things in combination that got me to really wake up and decide, I'm going to start taking those small steps to achieve these impractical possibilities. And no, my brother is 100% fine now. He really is truly a miracle.
That was going to be my next question.
Yeah.
So thank you for sharing that full
Of
circle.
course.
And so scary. And that there was something that you gained even from that. So I think that what
Yes.
if question that you so beautifully teach us how to ask is necessary when you're at the highest of highs. Like, what if I could feel like this more frequently? And even at the lowest of lows, in a moment like that where your brother was struggling and you weren't sure what the outcome was going to be, and you were just like, what if I actually started this business and got this thing going? So how did you know what to do? Or what did you think that you were going to start your business doing?
So so when I first started my business, and for those 6 years, I'm like, it's going to be called Craftivity Events, and I'm going to bring creativity into the workplace. I'm going to have workshops in my backyard. I'm going to gut a school bus and turn it into an art center where I drive to birthday parties. Right? So all these ideas, and I never did the school bus, but I start off um, so I think the first thing I did was I just had a party in my backyard. I invited some people over. We did a workshop I decided to call Weave of Dreams, which was doing some exercise around like what are our values, what are our goals, and then weaving them into this yarn hanging with muslin strips, yarn, and I loved it. And then what I decided to do was let me see if I can get this into the corporate world. And everyone said no. Because like crafting events, because literally what I was trying to do is just bring arts and crafts into the corporate world.
Right.
And I wasn't tying it to any type of ROI or learning development. So my first step though was literally to get online and just Google creativity in the workplace. And what I found was a woman in San Diego who certifies people in creative what is it called? She called it creativity coaching. So I took that, and with a 17-week online course on creativity coaching, I thought maybe this is what it is. I'll be a creativity coach.
Yeah.
And in that process, I realized what I was doing is I was using all the tips and tools she was giving us to coach other people to coach myself. And part of that was this concept of just take those small steps, trick your brain into believing that you can do it by taking small steps rather than trying to accomplish these big goals.
Wonderful. And now you work with Google and LinkedIn and Pandora
That's
and
right.
hosts of other companies with these workshops that you have evolved over this period of time with your business. It's unbelievable. And one of the things that you do, and you said you really believe in the hands-on experience, the creativity, creating environments where people can play. And you're licensed in, and you teach this Lego Serious Play type of a workshop. I would be curious to hear more about that.
Yeah, so Lego Serious Play was such a powerful tool. So I am a certified trainer and licensed facilitator, and it's a process where you're allowing people to think with their hands. So it's this idea of tactile learning and having people share ideas, build their ideas so they can share it here versus from here. And there's something about that, right? Something psychological about being able to share your ideas when it's outside of you versus here. And the other thing about Lego Serious Play too is, there's so much I can tell you about it, but it's a great collaboration tool because once again, if we're sharing ideas and I say, how about this idea? And you're like, well, what about this one? How about this too? There's something subconsciously even might be like, my idea was a little bit stepped on. But when you're building Lego and you have all these ideas on the table and you're building upon each other's ideas through Lego, that's what it's meant for. Right? Lego is meant to be shared, collaborated with, and again, it's one step outside of you, so it makes it okay. The other, and Lego Serious plays a whole facilitation methodology, but another thing about it that's really valuable is this concept of everyone builds, everyone shares. So if you're in a meeting and you're leading the meeting and you say, here's a challenge, who has an idea to solve for this? You might get those one or two people who raise their hand all the time and share ideas. And then you might get me, who could be introverted when I'm asked a question like that, and I'll say nothing because in my head I might be thinking, well, what if I'm giving the wrong answer? What if it's not a good answer? So I'll say nothing. But when you create this environment where everyone builds and everyone shares, you're getting all the ideas on the table. And then what you do is say, because the thing is, everyone, even though they're not sharing, everyone has one idea, right? And then what you want to do is ask them again, now build 2 more ideas, right? And then give them, now you have 8 minutes to build as many ideas as you can, with the caveat of all ideas matter. There's no such thing as a bad idea. Wild and crazy ideas are welcome. So you're allowing people to get creative and just share as many ideas as possible and not be wrong.
And what would be a prompt for the group to be focused on, or the frame that they're exploring? I know it changes, but what would be examples of some of those prompts?
So, I mean, and Lego Serious Play can be used for so many things. So let's say you're trying to get people to get to know each other, right? As a team development one. So build an idea that represents one of the strengths you bring to your team. And, build a model to represent an accomplishment that you're proud of. And these are things, again, that oftentimes when you're like, oh, share a strength, people think like, oh, that sounds like bragging. I don't want to share my strength. But if you build it, it's easier to share. For problem solving, it might be something like build an idea to solve for the challenge of retention at work, right? How might we solve for that? And then people will build their ideas. And then ultimately at the end, what you want to do is have a landscape community-based plate where you can combine ideas and be like, what are the top 3 out of everyone's ideas? What are the top 3? And now what you have at the end is this consolidated group of ideas that everyone has had a chance to put their hands on.
That's so exciting. I've been a part of workshops like that, and I've led some creativity type workshops. So for those who are listening to this and thinking, practically speaking, like, are you talking about building with Legos? The answer is yes.
Yes. Where's my, I have sometimes I'll bring sometimes I'll bring my entire, I probably have 100 pound of Legos in my house.
Your son must love that.
Time. And then these are like small Lego kits I sometimes bring called exploration kits, and everyone gets one. And it's amazing how much you can build with this little box of Lego. But yes, you're right. It is like you are built. You'll coming in the room. There'll be Lego on the table, and you get to play with Lego.
And you get to play with Legos, and then there is a purpose to it, right?
That's right.
It's fun and it is practical and gets results.
Yes.
What are some of the ways you've seen people demonstrate generosity in these workshops?
Well, it's so interesting because I think when you allow people to play and be creative, generosity just sort of evolves and comes out of that. I think within the process of Lego Serious Play, generosity is built in the fact that, when there's rules around Lego Serious Play, like as people are building or as people are sharing, there's no crosstalk, right? You generously give your listening and you allow people the space to share their idea without judgment.
So important. Do you create those ground rules in the beginning of your session?
We do. And it is like in Lego Serious Play as a facilitation methodology, those are ground rules that as a Lego Serious Play facilitator, everyone follows those ground rules. And that's what makes it work.
Yeah, and I think there's a reason why you have the word serious in the middle of the topic title, right? It's Lego Serious Play because you tell me, like, what is the reason why it's named that?
That's exactly right. Because when people think Lego, they think it's child's play, it's just play. But the serious is there not because the process is serious, right? Because we're doing serious work. We're tackling serious issues with this concept of play and creativity.
It's so much fun to think outside the box like that and to come up with new ideas. Several times already you have talked about the small steps and the incremental step forward, and the thought of a big change is overwhelming, so that causes people to not do anything. So I'm a big believer in that too with my 5-degree principle. So wanted to get more of your thought leadership on why is that so important? Like, what are the reasons why you recommend that people take small steps?
So, I mean, the recommendation is based on neuroscience, right? So our brains are designed to stop us from doing anything that's going to bring us harm. And I'm sure you've heard this before. Maybe some of your listeners have heard this before too. But the amygdala is part of our brain that is designed for fight or flight. And way back when we were being chased by tigers, right? We
Right.
needed that thing to be triggered so we could react quickly. But nowadays, like everything triggers our anxiety, our fight or flight when it's not designed for the way we live now, right? So when you think about something that is not harmful to us, but is overwhelming, like starting a business, moving to a new country, whatever that is, the immediate thing your brain is going to do is shut you down. And it's going to say, nope, we're not doing that. That is dangerous. So, so if you're able to, what I call like bypass that bodyguard, our amygdala, by taking small steps, when you take small steps around these large leaps, what happens is you shut down that amygdala. You never, not even shut it down. You don't trigger it, right? So you can tiptoe past it, and then you can take those small steps and reach your goals faster.
I love that. You say that in your TED Talk, and it's genius. It's like that tiptoeing around is so vivid to me, that because it's not that it's not there. Your goal is to try to make progress without waking it up. And I love
That's
how you
right.
call it a bodyguard, because it is designed to protect us, but it is in fact helping. It is preventing us from making progress sometimes.
That's right. And I think the more people understand that and know that, to me it was very liberating to understand that, oh, this is this is neuroscience, right? And there's a
Right.
reason why. It's not because I'm lazy. It's
Not,
not what is not
not
none
because
of things.
I'm
There's no judgment
empowered.
against myself.
Yeah, right.
Yes.
Sure.
Yeah, it's just the way we're built. So
Which
to
is
be
more
aware of
generous.
it.
Yeah, it's a more generous and accurate way of understanding how we operate, and how can we keep making progress and overcome that, or get around it, tiptoe around it. It's so vivid.
Yeah.
So your history is one of generosity, like you said in your opening remarks. I would love for you to tell us a little bit more about just how you experience generosity as a young person and how you experience it now.
Great. So the biggest story about generosity when I was younger was when we were in that refugee integration center. Well, I can't not start with the Marines, right? So I
I think
cannot
you have to,
not
yeah.
start with
Something we
um
have in common.
yeah, the fact, you're right, the fact that
Yeah.
we are here in the United States. My family made it to the United States because the generosity of the U.S. military, the U.S. government, and being able to come over here. We were housed at Camp Pelham Marine Base for the first several months we were here, and these Marines had less than 36 hours to prepare for 18,000 Vietnamese refugees to show up. And they did what they're supposed to do, right? They built us the tent homes, they arranged everything else. But when I look back, I was only 2, so I don't recall any of this. But for my mom's stories, like, they also built us a preschool, which I got kicked out of fighting. But that's another story. They also, I see pictures where they were playing ball with us. They were playing musical instruments. They were teaching kids how to read and write. And then recently I read a story, an interview with a Vietnamese woman who was a teenager when she got to camp. And she said when she stepped off the bus, a Marine was there to help her off the bus. And he said to her in Vietnamese, "Welcome to your new country. I hope you feel safe here."
Ah,
Right. Yeah. So we were talking right before this how, these tough Marines think, look at themselves as these warriors, and they are. But you and I were saying how we look at them as humanitarians.
oh
So,
my gosh,
so
yes.
that was really the first act of generosity that we experienced here, and I experienced as a small young child. And then after, we couldn't stay at Camp Pendleton forever. So there is a nonprofit organization called Food for the Hungry who opened up a refugee integration center up in Sacramento in a little place called Waymar. And they brought in a ton of volunteers to help us in this transition, right? And one of the volunteers happened to be Hollywood movie star Tippie Hedren. If you know who she is, she's most famously known for her role in Alfred Hitchcock's movie The Birds. For other generations, she's Melanie Griffith's mom and Dakota Johnson's grandma.
Okay.
So she volunteered at the camp, and her role there was to help the women at the camp find a new career. So she put together this program. They made typing and sewing classes available. And my mom signed up along with 19 other women. And as these women were typing and sewing, Tippie would walk around the room encouraging them. And as she did so, they noticed something that completely caught their attention that was different than typing and sewing. And that was Tippie's long red manicured nails. And this is like, and so far, I mean, the story I'm telling you so far, Tippie's generosity and the generosity of everyone there volunteering, that alone was generosity enough.
Mm-hmm.
But it continues because Tippie, this famous movie star who had already created this entire program for these 20 women, she paid attention to that curiosity, right? Despite everything she'd already done for them, she was even more generous with her time, and she paid attention to their curiosity. And that got them to open up and ask those questions like, what if, how might we become licensed manicurists? And that led to the first small step of Tippie inviting her manicurist up to Hope Village, to Waymar's Hope Village. And Dusty Kuspatera taught her generosity. She taught my mom and her friends how to do a basic manicure. And they loved it. They were good at it. Didn't make them licensed manicurists. So then Tippie walked down to the local beauty school and asked the owners of Citrus Heights Beauty College, I have these 20 women. Most of them don't speak English. None of them have tuition to pay you, but they want to become manicurists. How can we make that happen? And through their generosity, the owners of Citrus Heights Beauty College also said yes. So then after 10 weeks and 400 hours of schooling, my mom and her friends became the first 20 licensed manicurists in the United States.
It's unbelievable.
It's an unbelievable story on so many different levels. But the through line is curiosity, right? The power of curiosity, the power of those small steps, and the power of generosity.
Yes. And please go on to share the ripple effect of that generosity.
Yeah. So then we were sponsored by churches or churches and families around the country. My family was sponsored by a church in Santa Monica, and Tippie actually showed up at our little 1-bedroom apartment and took my mom around looking for her first job, which she found. And it was the Vietnamese refugees and immigrants who came after us, who continued to learn about the profession from my mom and her friends, and ask themselves those questions like, how might we open our own beauty salons? What if we start our own beauty schools? How about we manufacture the supplies we need? One of my mom's friends from high school in Vietnam came to her little salon, saw her working, and she and her husband started the first beauty school here in Orange County, who's now, I think they've licensed about 50,000 manicurists over the last 40 plus years.
Oh my gosh.
Yes, ABC Beauty College. And it's now, at least at the time of my TEDx talk in 2019, is an $8.3 billion industry dominated by Vietnamese Americans across the country, 59% across the country, 80% here in California. And those are really big numbers, right? $8.3 billion. But really what it kind of like, when you think about it, what that means is how many families were able to create a life for themselves here in this country, support their children, so that their children like me could create what we're creating now.
Yes. And I'm so grateful for your appreciation of that generosity and sharing your story, because it has completely come full circle with me on any service providers, but in particular manicurists, to know this was the origin of, because I was always wondering why is it that there are so many Vietnamese manicurists who are exceptional at this, and they own these shops and they're so great at their craft. And then I heard your story and I was like, and then to know that it came out of volunteer work. And have you ever heard Tippie talk about her why? What is her why?
she was just, I mean, my mom still keeps in touch with her, and I've had a chance to meet Tippie several occasions over my lifetime. And she doesn't really, I mean, she's just a generous person, right? She
Mhm.
was just
Yeah.
like, she just cared. I mean, her only reason was like, she just looked at these women and cared about them and
Mhm.
thought, how can I help them? Right?
Yeah.
There was no like, what can they give me, right? Like, how
Right,
can I,
right.
like, how can I use this for my celebrity? There's so many things that Tippie, this is just one story of Tippie's generosity. There's so many
Yeah.
things that she's done in the background that no one knows about,
Mhm.
that has been just so powerful and impactful on the lives of people and animals.
Yeah. Oh, really? That's
Yeah. Yeah.
so
She's done a big cat, like a lion, tiger, big cat sanctuary up in the mountains here in Southern California.
oh my
Yeah.
goodness. That
Yeah.
is so
Yeah.
interesting.
Yeah.
What a love.
I think like in terms of like the Vietnamese refugees too, um I know the word's not chartered, but she chartered an old Navy vessel and went out into the seas to help the boat people in the 80s.
Oh
Like
my
there's a
god.
remarkable woman.
And so you pay it forward in a lot of ways too. And I know you're humble and don't talk about that very much, but one of the ways that you do that is through the Honor Foundation. And I would love for you to share with our listeners, what is that, with our mutual love of the United States Marine Corps and our reverence for them, and all of the services that the very honorable people provide for our freedom. Curious to learn about the Honor Foundation and what you do with them, and maybe some of our listeners might want to participate.
Oh, absolutely. The Honor Foundation is an organization they have several campuses across the country. I particularly work with mostly the San Diego campus because I'm here in California. But the Honor Foundation is a nonprofit organization that serves special force operators like Navy SEALs, Marine Raiders, Green Berets as they transition from military to civilian careers. And I want to start with how that transition, that the idea of transitioning for any of us is difficult. But thinking about, especially over the last 20 years, what these men and women have been through,
Mm-hmm.
right, with Iraq, Afghanistan, and going through a program like this and working with so many of them, and for them to say to me and the other volunteers there, transition is the hardest thing we've ever been through, is pretty powerful. And
Mm.
I highly suggest anyone who is called to take action and volunteer to help within that transition any way you can. You're doing very powerful work, really life-saving work.
Mm-hmm.
So the Honor Foundation, they have a 3-month program for transitioning special force operators. And it's a really well thought out program where they first talk about, what's your why? Imagine being in the military where you're told what your why is for all these years. So they start with what's your why for the first month. They have them tell their stories in a very like TEDx style way. And then the second month, they get very practical, right? Here's what the workforce looks like. Here's how you write a resume. Here's how you interview. And they take them out on treks to see what different corporate cultures look like. So if you run a company and you're willing to have these men and women in for a trek, that's another way to volunteer. And then month 3 is about how do you put this all together, and let's talk about your future now. And where I come in is I come in on the last class before graduation, and it's called Transition Night. And that's where I bring in all my creative tools, Lego serious play, creative problem solving, visual connections. And we look at what's possible for their future. And we start off with this, I tell them my story, of course, about transition in my mom's story. And then we start off with, your military career can inform what you do next, but doesn't command what you do next. So we look at all the opportunities and we use all these creative methodologies to get them thinking differently, get them thinking outside that box and building ideas for their future, building out of Play-Doh. I do an exercise called visual connections. Well, I'll put up 3 images and I'll say, what characteristics of these images remind you of something you loved to do when you were younger? Right. And then we'll take that and be like, what can that be now in the future? And we practice all this through the concept of divergent thinking, which is a creative problem solving process or principle that all ideas matter. All your ideas matter. There's no wrong ideas. There's no judgment of your ideas, and your wild and crazy ideas are welcome. Because what we want people to do is just think as expansively as possible. And then we can do the second part of that type of thing is called convergent thinking. It's like, great, you've got all these ideas off the table. You've done it through Lego, you've done it through arts and crafts, whatever it might be. So you have all these amazing ideas on the table. Now let's look what you talked about in month 1, right? What are your parameters? You want to live in San Diego. You want to make X amount of money. Your family has to be part of the decision-making process. And you have to keep them in mind. Whatever your parameters are, you set them for yourselves. Now look at all these amazing things you just built, and what can you start moving across those parameters?
Oh my gosh, that's brilliant. And what would be an example of one of the outcomes you've seen as a result of that exercise?
Sure. So I'll give you 2. So one just happens to be, one is about Lego Serious Play, because if you can imagine, I was mentioning before where, the very first time I walked into the Honor Foundation in San Diego, like 5'2" me, right? With all my Lego, put all these Legos on like 15 tables, and so don't judge, but my impression of a veteran was, I'm going to work with these little old men, right? How cute. So I have all my arts and crafts supplies on the tables. In walk basically what you would imagine 40 Navy SEALs, Marine Raiders, and Green Berets look like.
Right.
So intimidating. So what started as so intimidating has, because of the success of it, I've been asked back every quarter. I'm part of their volunteer faculty now. I've been asked back every quarter for the last 4 years. So it works. And what started as intimidating for me turned into what has given me the most given me more confidence in the work I do. Right. I'm like, I go to companies and CEOs are like, is this going to work? I'm like, well, it works with Navy SEAls.
Right. Exactly. Come on.
So to give you 2 examples, the first one, particularly about Lego Serious Play, I had this one gentleman come up and share what he had built. Like we talked about, build an idea for your future. And he came up and he's admitted, I was really skeptical about this Lego thing.
Fair.
And then as we started building, he's like, I want to be an entrepreneur. So as I started building this path to entrepreneurship, I saw myself wobbling on this side, right? It started falling over, which made me realize, maybe I need something more to build that foundation first, either education or a coach. So really got him to see, like, this is my path and here's what I need now, physically as a Lego build. And then the other one was, this was during the time of COVID. So I was doing this virtually. This one gentleman, he built a Lego figure of himself. Like it looked like he was on a boat or something on the top of the boat. And he sent a picture of it because he lives somewhere where you see the ocean. So he put it on his patio and he took a picture. He's like, this is me. This is like what I see myself in the future. And a few months later, he sends me that picture again with him on the dock. And he found a position for himself as a yacht broker in San Diego.
Oh my.
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
That must be incredible to get to stay in touch with them and see how that vision that they have that day when they're feeling so lost, but they're really, pouring themselves into this training opportunity, and then they actually go and make that happen.
Yes, absolutely. Just as and just to see the difference, even in that night of like, most people's first build is something like, I'm going to be a consultant. I'm going to work in project management. I'm going to go work for the Department of Defense. And then we start talking about like, well, what do you love to do when you're younger? And then you get things like, maybe I'll use my skills from the military and my love of playgrounds to be an architect for playgrounds, right? It's like, just like things that would have never come up if we hadn't put things and Legos and Play-Doh and stuff in their hands so they could think differently.
And for you to have the style that disarms them and creates a space where all ideas are valuable, I think that's a gift that you give to them, and you let them just explore that in a very generous and safe way. That's such a wonderful thing that you do. Thank you for that.
Thank you. Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much.
So I wanted to do some rapid fire questions and get your responses to it. Courageously, you did not want to see these in advance. So here
I'm
we
an
go.
overthinker, so you told me them in advance, I
I
would have
know.
bought them.
Well, and we have to trust, just like you
That's
like you
right.
teach us, right? We have to trust. Okay, so this first one is, what is something that you are really curious about right now?
Oh, this is an easy one for me. I I am curious. I've been curious. Like, how do I move to a farm and have a Highland miniature cow?
Oh,
Yes.
that's very specific. Interesting. Okay. I want to know more about that, but I'll
Offline. Yeah.
stick with the program. What would change if pigs could fly? That was your book. We
Okay.
didn't get to talk about that
Yes.
enough. So
Yeah.
by all means, you could give a full circle answer.
Sure. Okay. So what would change it? So what if pigs can fly? The so I have my little pig right here actually. So when I was in college, I had this little polymer clay pig. This is a 3D printed one I've created for people now, but it just hung in the rear view mirror of my Toyota Tercel, flying back and forth. I had no air conditioning, so the window was down all the time. And I think subconsciously that made me believe like pigs can fly, and we as human beings can do anything we want. So what if pigs can fly metaphorically to me is like, what if every single person who's listening to this, who reads this book, takes one small step towards that curiosity? What would the
Mm.
world look like?
Ah, let's find out.
Yes, I would love to
Yes,
find out.
please. Yes. What never fails to make you laugh?
What never fails to make me laugh? I'm just gonna say my kid. Like he's always saying things. I'm like, what? And where did that come from? That what always no, what never fails to make me angry too. That could be the same same answer to that question.
We're just stay on the positives, right? I mean, it's
Right.
just like life. There's ups and downs. But yes, I mean, our children are so sacred. So what do you do for fun? I know you teach us how to have fun and you encourage fun. What do you do for fun?
So my latest thing that I've been learning is how to do stained glass windows. And that's part of my farm dream too. My farm what if as
Wow.
well. Yes, I want to. It's just something because again, like that hands-on creativity has been something I've always been interested in, and I just started taking some stained glass classes, and it's amazing. I love it. I call it
Wow.
aggressive meditation because there's something about like cutting the glass and grinding. I'm like, oh, this totally suits me.
This is so perfect and meditative in my kind of way.
Yes,
Yeah.
absolutely.
Oh my gosh. So what have you created? Like, have you created a stained
Yeah,
glass
so I mean, I don't
something?
have it right here, but I have a window panel. It's like a sunset, and this was my very first one. They had these mold, not molds, what do you call them? Just
Like
templates. So I did
templates.
that
Yeah.
one, and I did a 3D hummingbird, and I gave that to a friend. And now, oh, my newest thing is I'm working on a 3D flying pig.
Oh, I can't wait to see that.
Yeah,
Oh my gosh,
you might
please
even
tell us
get
about
one,
it.
Shannon.
Oh, I want one. Yes. So you also talk about journaling, and that's another topic we didn't cover today, but everybody just needs to get your book and follow you on social. One of the things you talk about is journaling. So I was curious to understand your thoughts on what impact does journaling have on your life?
So for me, it's like I just mentioned, I'm an overthinker and I have a lot of ideas in my head. If I don't get them on paper, they will disappear. So for me, journaling isn't full sentences even, right? Like
Hmm.
in the morning or when ideas pop up, I'll just bullet point them. And I think again, it's one of those things where I feel like even the idea of journaling sometimes is overwhelming to me because like it can mean so many different things to different people.
Hmm.
But to me, if I just say I'm just whatever comes to my mind, I was going to jot it down. And in the book, I talk about just let that be it, right? Don't have intention for it. Don't even, no need to even write in full sentences. But
Hmm.
maybe on a Sunday morning, give yourself 15 minutes to give yourself a little journaling date and look
Hmm.
through and see like if there's anything that comes up for you that you want to move forward with.
Yeah. Oh, that's so wonderful. And that too is like that tiptoeing around the amygdala
That's
type
right.
of thing where it's not like, oh, now I'm going to pick up journaling and then if I don't do it, I'm a failure. It's more like just write down a couple of words, like
Yeah.
whatever's on your mind and then so that you don't lose them. I think that's the other thing is that some of these thoughts just evaporate if we don't capture them somewhere.
Yes. Yeah. And I think, I
So
mean, it's similar to, I think someone had mentioned, well, there's some study about goal setting. If you set a goal and write it down, there's a much higher percentage of it happening. So in a similar framework, right? Writing it down will at least
Mhm.
capture it so it's more likely to happen.
Right. Yeah, and explore it later. I love that, having a
Yeah.
date with your own journal. So you have trademarked a um, process that you call leadership canvas, and
Yes.
you have these building block topics like breaking through silos for collaboration and creative leadership, executive presence, making equity and inclusion actionable, all of these things. So I was curious to hear your thoughts on which of your building blocks is the most fun for you personally.
So one of my building blocks is teaching creative leadership, so creative problem solving, and I just love that one. And I will say, like, the reason why it's my favorite is because I am the subject matter expert for that one. The way Leadership Canvas works is, when I first started my business 10 years ago, it was like if someone calls like, "Oh, do you teach a tax class?" I would say yes. Like, let me figure it out, and I will teach
Yep.
you because
Figure out how.
you're like desperate to have clients. And what I realized over time is the best way for me to serve my clients is to give them the best of the best, right? And to
Mm,
bring in subject matter experts. So the way Leadership Canvas works is it's all based on creative methodology, but I bring subject matter experts in to teach the different topics.
and that makes
My
sense.
topic happens to be creative problem solving, creative leadership, so I would have to say that was my favorite. And
Yes. Oh,
and because it's so expansive, right? It really teaches people how to allow all voices on the table, your own different perspectives and other people's perspectives. And that's
yes.
where, you know, I know you had interviewed Amy Edmondson about psychological safety, right?
Hmm.
Like um, that's how you create psychological safety and trust when you can create an environment where all voices matter. And that's what creative
Mhm.
leadership and creative problem solving does.
And you model that so well.
Thank
So
you.
you shared your story, your history, your family, and thank you so much for sharing that with us. I'm curious to know, what is one thing that you wish that people understood about being an immigrant?
Oh, so what's one thing people understood about being an immigrant is, well, I'm going to tie this back to the work with the Honor Foundation too, is that
Hmm.
it really is like, I mean, I don't know how to put it in a short way,
Yeah,
but
that's okay.
imagine, you know, losing everything, like including your homeland and having to go somewhere else and starting over, right? So I would say maybe not so much to understand about it, but to realize about, or to realize like how you might um approach other people who are immigrants is with
Mm,
patience, care, and generosity. Because
mm.
I mean, it's funny you're asking this the other night, today, because the other night I was just laying around thinking, like, my goodness, like my parents, like within the night had to like leave everything, like all these little things I have, like
Yeah.
even like the biggest things and the littlest things, they had to leave all of it behind.
Hmm.
And then to tie it back into the work of the Honor Foundation and veterans is I talked with a couple other veteran groups, and there was one veteran group I was talking to where this gentleman was talking about his transition into his new career in the civilian world, and how he walked around feeling like, I don't understand this language. I don't understand this culture. I was like, oh my gosh, the transition experience is so much like the immigrant experience.
Mm,
So I would say what to understand is, again, not to say what to understand, but have patience, have
mm.
generosity.
Mm, so important for a variety of different human experiences, including, moving to a different country and starting a
Yeah.
life somewhere without anything familiar to you. Yeah, I think that kindness and generosity and compassion and that willingness to help. Like, how can I help? How can
Yeah.
I be, inclusive? So then lastly is, what's one step, like, for practical advice, because you're so into practical, like, what's one
Mhm.
thing that you would ask our listeners to practice as a result of hearing this conversation? What's one bit of encouragement or advice you have for us?
Sure. So I'm going to say the first step of my of the curiosity framework is pause and pay attention. Right? When you hear or feel, hear that whisper or feel that tap on your shoulder of a curiosity, it's an idea waiting for you to bring it to life. So
Hmm.
pause and pay attention.
Mm,
Um, we live in this world that we're always busy. We're so busy, and we often are not pausing and paying attention to those curiosities. And there's a book that I reference in my book, Elizabeth Gilbert's Big Magic. I highly recommend that book. And she talks about ideas as living things, right? They're living things waiting to be made manifest. And the only way they can come to life is through a human partner. So if you can imagine those whispers, those taps, like those are your ideas. Those are ideas floating around trying to find a human partner. And it has chosen you. And it might tap you a few times, might whisper for years, but if you don't pay attention, ideas want to be made manifest. So they'll go somewhere else. So it's our job to pay attention.
Brilliant. Well, thank you for being you, for sharing this precious time with us, for sharing all of this encouragement, and really just for being a light. I'm so deeply grateful for you.
Thank you, Shannon. Oh, I'm so grateful that you reached out to have me on this podcast. Thank you so much.
Thanks for listening to R.O.G, Return on Generosity podcast. Please help us grow by subscribing and reviewing us on your favorite podcast player. And for more information, visit bridgebetween.com. We grow when we give.
우리는 나누면서 성숙합니다.
We grow when we give.
On rayonne quand on donne.
We grow when we give.